Morning, blessings, y'all. Road Pastor. I'm going to read the devotional. I didn't have time for service, and I have to still figure out where I'm going with services and things like that. So, this one talked about Jesus violates purification laws. Scripture is Mark 5:25 through 34. They're using the ESV version. It says, "And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, 'If I touch even his garments, I will be made well.' Immediately the flow of blood dripped up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out of him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, 'Who touched my garments?' And his disciples said to him, 'You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, Who touched me?' And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing that she had happened to hear her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the truth. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease.'" So here in Scripture, let's get into the devotional part. The brave woman who approached Jesus in this story is a lawbreaker. Instructions for menstruating women listed in Leviticus 15, including isolation, so they wouldn't cause others to become ritually impure. She would have been housebound for years because of this unexplained and incurable issue of blood. Her life would have been severely curtailed, struck within the confines of the walls of her home. But out she goes into the crowd, having heard Jesus was passing through town, and hoping and praying he might heal her. She compounds this sinfulness by touching his garment, despite knowing she was defiling him in the process. It wasn't her fault that she'd been bleeding for years. It was governed by some internal mystery of organs and hormones, and wasn't fixable, despite her efforts to try and change it. The same thing is true for LGBTQIA+ people. Their gender and sexual orientation are not something controllable or chosen. It can't be fixed, though conversation, therapy, or stern biblical admonitions. It simply is. These people shouldn't be confined to closets as this woman with the issue of blood had been. It wasn't her strict adherence to the rites and rituals of religion that made her whole. It was her faith, and that faith allowed her to go in peace. Meanwhile, Jesus continued along his way to resurrect the dead daughter of a religious official, despite knowing he'd been made ritually unclean. He didn't stop for ritual purification. He went on in violation of the law to continue his mystery. And here says the Right Reverend Gene Robinson, Jesus was consistently on the side of those who were outcast by society, and bore the unfair burden of disdain, discrimination, and prejudice. It is likely that he would look at modern-day lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and hold real sympathy for them and their plight. He would have understood the implications of a system set up to benefit the heterosexual majority over the homosexual minority. It is hard to imagine Jesus joining in the wholesale discrimination against LGBTQIA2S+ community. Isn't it logical that he would be sympathetic to young gay teens who take their own lives rather than live with the stigma attached to their sexual orientation? Would he not be found speaking a word of support, encouraging, and hope to them? Would he not be seeking a change in the hearts of those who treat them as outcasts? So here with this devotional, dear siblings, I read it because it brings scripture into the fact that it says it's not a choice. No one in that community chooses to be who they are. They just decided to own who they are and not hide it from the public. And yet we have too many people in the public that choose to be pretty much ignorant and use the Bible for harm. They use scripture for harm. They use what they have heard in the pulpit for harm. And the problem is those in the pulpits that are fear-mongering to create fearful rage, to get people to cast votes for them, and so forth, are only causing harm, only causing more unalivings. And what we need to realize is those are the radicals that are extreme. Those are no different than the Roman Empire. Those are no different than the Pharisees of Jesus' time. If we're going to say we are Christians, if we're going to say that we love like Jesus, then we need to act as Jesus did. And that is reaching out to those that are considered marginalized communities, that is standing up for those that are being oppressed, that is standing up for the LGBTQIA plus community, that is standing up against genocides like in Palestine, that is standing up for Ukraine as Russia invades, and so forth, that is standing up for the genocide happening in Congo. We need to be able to act as Jesus did, and that would be walking with those communities. Jesus would have asked for social programs to stay, not to cancel them so we can put more money in the 1% rich. And for any of you who are looking for what book that I'm reading out of, it is this one, Where True Love Is. And ultimately, may this mini service bless you, remind you of your importance, remind you that you matter, and get you who cares about others to go get New Hope Rising. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful Sunday. Go in peace and have a blessed day.